Oh yeah, that one.
Okay, so first of all, so the sources I use is I really like these books. I got Long War, I.R.A, and Fighting for Ireland. I found that if you are interested, Long War and Fighting for Ireland are really interesting, really good books. I.R.A, good but pretty dry. And also I found that for some of the earlier information, Simon Schama's History of Britain is a pretty good source. So first off, I'm going to give a background, a historical background. I'm not going to go too much about it. I'm not going to do like a whole history of Ireland, but you really can't talk about the Irish Republican Army without talking about Ireland, the history, and kind of what led up to it. So I'll just try to skim as much through it as possible without, sacrificing content. And also before I start, when we talk about the Irish Republican Army, it's sort of a misnomer. It's not the Irish Republican Army, more like the Irish Republican Armies, because there are definitely multiple ones. You have, for instance, what's now known as the old I.R.A, at the time just the I.R.A, also called Oglach na Éireann. No disclaimer, I'm probably going to butcher the Gaelic pronunciations, sorry. And this was the I.R.A that fought the War of Independence, is the first one to be called the I.R.A. There's also the Irish National Liberation Army, which is kind of most closely associated with the Irish Socialist Working Party. There's Cumann na Ban, which is the Women's Auxiliary. There is the Continual I.R.A, the Provisional I.R.A, the Original I.R.A, the Real I.R.A, and then pretty much any group of Anglophobes pipe bomb call themselves I.R.A. So pretty much there are multiple I.R.As, and I'm going to also try to cover the different splits, different factions, but I can't get to all of them in detail. Okay, so history background. Pretty much the history, the first part comes in back in 1169 was the first time that England and Ireland had contact. It was the Norman invasion. Not much happened after this. England invaded. They were fought back. They considered Ireland a lordship, and they governed it, but pretty much gave it free reign. They didn't really clamp down too tightly on it. What really happened was in 1542, when King Henry VIII declared himself King of Ireland, he was declared the King of England, Ireland, and that's where he got the United Kingdom and Ireland. He became head of the Church of England. This is the first time that England really became Protestant, really became identified as Protestant, and Ireland was pretty much identifying itself as Catholic. And this is really significant because this will crop up throughout like the entire history of Ireland up until today. And next major event happened in 1605 with the gunpowder plot. Remember the 5th of November, Guy Fawkes tried to blow up Parliament. At this time, the English had been trying to clamp down on Catholic freedom in England, and so in order to create sort of a revolution, Guy Fawkes entered Parliament and was stuck into Parliament underneath and tried to pretty much destroy it. This, of course, failed. He was discovered. He was in the conspirator, tortured, killed, and after that, there was a big clamping down on freedom for Catholics in England, and this kind of spilled over to Ireland. The English were afraid that the Irish could possibly uprise, that they would be counted as allies by either France or Spain. This happened before. The Spanish Armada during Elizabeth's reign, they tried to contact Ireland for support, but pretty much the ships were destroyed and it was lost. However, in 1641, the first time Ireland managed to have what's called the first Irish uprising and Irish rebellion. Ireland at this point until 1649 was pretty much a free state for the first time since the conquest. The response to this was in 1649 the Cromwellian conquest, where Oliver Cromwell, also known as First Lord Protector of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland, and Ireland, pretty much he hated Irish, he hated Catholics, so you can imagine how he felt about Irish Catholics. England kind of wanted to punish Ireland, so they sent him over there to do his thing, which included a whole lot of burning, looting, killing, shooting. including deporting over 50,000 Irish to Barbados and Bermuda as essentially slaves. And you can actually find more about that in this book specifically about this period called The Heller Barbados and the Ethnic Cleansing of Ireland. And the first actual rebellion that was sort of across the religious divide happened in 1798 with Theobald Wolfe Tone, and this was the second time that Ireland became a free, independent. It was only for a few months, but it also pretty much after this point, Irish nationalism became much stronger. They had a taste of freedom, and we have the Society of United Irishmen created by Wolfe Tone, and it's significant because Wolfe Tone, who was this big Irish hero, was not Catholic, he was actually Protestant, and though he fought for Catholic emancipation, he himself was Protestant, and you'll find that in Pro-Black Aaron, the big thing is religious freedom, and pretty much all of the major I.R.A. are for religious freedom, and this was a big thing with Wolfe Tone as well. The next really significant event happened in 1844 with the blight, the potato famine, the Great Famine. Essentially, a blight killed most of the potato crop. And what is not true is that this killed all the food in Ireland. There was plenty of food in Ireland. The food was, for instance, wheat or other cash crops. However, these were on English landlords. Like I mentioned, England invaded and had been taking up Irish lands. Well, all the cash crops were on English property, so they were sold back to England, and this meant that all the Irish had left were pretty much the cheap potatoes that they couldn't sell, and when those died, many of the Irish died. The big effect of the famine was that it pretty much cut the Irish population in half. About half of that was due to the actual death from the famine, and the rest was from immigration to mostly America, United States of America, and Canada. And let's see. And this sort of mass immigration would come into play actually pretty soon after this. So, in 1858, we have what's called the Fenian Brotherhood, was founded in the United States. This was actually the first time that there was Irish rebellion in the U.S. itself. In 1858, the Fenians tried to actually overthrow British Canada and use it as a ransom for Ireland. It was, of course, a big failure. They thought they could get United States support, probably relying on the fact that the United States had fought 2 wars with England and passed revolution in 1812, but they never got the support, and they were pretty much crushed and killed. But it was significant because the Fenian Brotherhood, while in Canada it was pretty much crushed, in the U.S. it was still alive and would provide support throughout the history of the I.R.A. later. Also, the Fenian Brotherhood, also known as the Irish Republican Brotherhood, at this point, even as far back as the 1860s, was conducting essentially bombing attacks in England. This is essentially the prototypical I.R.A. The next really big event was the founding of Sinn Féin. This pretty much the most influential political party in Ireland, was founded in 1905, and while it was a political party, it pretty much always had links with, at this point, the I.R.A. Later on, when the splits, they would be linked with the Provisional Irish Republican Army. And let's see, the next big event, Easter Rising in 1916. Now, while this was led and planned by the Irish Republican Brotherhood, the action was carried out by many different groups. Essentially, the Irish Republican Brotherhood called the Óglacht na Éireann, the Irish Volunteers, Gahard na Éireann, the Irish Citizen Army, Cúm na Mban, the Women's League, as well as disaffected workers, and pretty much anyone who had Irish Republican tendencies were kind of taken under this banner of the Irish Republican Brotherhood. And this was the 24th of April when they seized locations in Dublin, and they drafted and proclaimed Pro-Black Aaron, which was the first time that Ireland had declared itself a republic in pretty much since since Wolfe Tone.